This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and pleased to have on the line with us, live from Florida, Farron Cousins, the co-host of Ring of Fire Radio, the executive editor of the Trial Lawyers magazine. Ringofireradio.com is the website, and you can tweet him at Farron Balanced, Farron Balanced, or at Ring of Fire Radio. Farron, welcome back to the program.
Tom, thanks for having me.
Great to have you with us. So, Exxon held their board of directors meeting yesterday, their shareholders meeting, and there was a woman, I'm missing her name, who her husband's name was Black, his last name. He was a scientist who worked for Exxon Mobile back in the 70s, and his I guess would be grandchild now. He's passed away. But his wife wrote a piece for The Guardian about this. What's going on? What's the story here?
Well, basically, Exxon decided at their meeting yesterday that they were going to continue doing what they've done since the 1970s, which is completely disregard any of the science that even they are producing that says that their activities are exacerbating climate change across the globe. And, you know, as we've learned recently in the last few months, starting back in the 1970s, long before Dr. James Hansen ever testified before Congress about rising CO2 emissions and global warming, Exxon knew that their activities were specifically creating this increase in carbon emissions that was warming up the planet. Now, they did absolutely nothing about it, but worse still, they hid these dangers up until these documents came out a few months ago from the public for almost 40 years. They knew almost before anyone else, and they hid these dangers for almost 4 decades.
Whoa. So, the tobacco, this is it seems to me deja vu all over again. I mean, this is, to quote Yogi Berra, the tobacco company knew back in the 30s and knew for certain by the 1940s that their product was killing people. They were, not estimating the large numbers that it actually does kill. Tobacco kills about 500,000 Americans every year, or more than that, actually, isn't it? But no, I think it's about, around 500,000 Americans a year, far more than car accidents or anything else. And instead of doing something about it, or even trying to make a less dangerous product, they invested in doubt, shall we say? Right. Let's doubt the science. Is this not the same playbook?
What's remarkable is that every time we see any kind of product like this, or a good or a service, it's always the exact same formula. You mentioned tobacco. It also reminisces what happened with the asbestos industry, because they knew back in the late 1800s that asbestos was causing these horrible lung conditions. They didn't have a name for it back in the 1890s, but they knew then. And it took, 50, 60 years before they ever finally admitted that something was wrong with asbestos. The same thing we're seeing now with the Monsanto's Roundup. They knew the dangers, did everything to cover it up. It's the same with every automobile recall, every kind of drug recall, every product recall that we have seen where these companies eventually end up going to court and losing tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for their deception. Now, the difference here, and this is the unfortunate difference, is that Exxon knew that their activities were leading to an increase in carbon dioxide emissions. Now, we know what that does, but we also know they weren't the only ones, and it's almost impossible to, track what carbon emissions were from Exxon, which were from Shell, and so on and so forth. So accountability, culpability at this point with Exxon is almost impossible because of the extent of what they do and how many other industries do it. It's not like they put out one specific product where that thing itself was killing people. So unlike everybody else, this looks like an instance where Exxon might be able to get off scot-free, at least here in the United States. Overseas in the United Kingdom, they have much stricter laws about deceiving the public, about, corporations lying. So that could be a very good avenue if, legislators in the United Kingdom decide to take Exxon to task for this. But here in the United States, unfortunately, I don't see it happening. We have the evidence. Oh, well, we have the evidence. I mean, this is no longer speculation or hearsay. We have the evidence. We have the documents. But Exxon owns Congress. They own the Senate. Yeah. They own everything. So I don't think anything really will happen in the United States unless the people get out there and absolutely demand it.
Yeah. There's another really consequential difference. My dad, when he went off to the Japanese occupation after World War II, joined the Army. In fact, he joined the Army just before the war ended, but by the time he got out of boot camp, it was over. They were passing out a carton of cigarettes every week to every serviceman, and that's when he started smoking. And he came back from that, and ultimately in the early 1950s got a job in a steel mill. In fact, he dropped out of college on the GI Bill because my mom got pregnant with me, and he went to work in a steel mill up in Grand Rapids. It was owned by Alcoa, I think, at the time, in order to pay for his new family. And he was literally working in a cloud of asbestos as the steel came out over these asbestos rollers. It was just a cloud. He would come home every night covered with asbestos. He was breathing it constantly. And he was smoking. And he ended up with mesothelioma, which is something that everybody who's exposed to asbestos doesn't always get. But if you're both exposed to asbestos and you smoked, the probabilities just explode, right? And that's pretty much what killed him. And so, these two industries lying to us for all these decades killed my father. But Exxon Mobile lying to us might kill us all. That's a difference.
It is. It's a very big difference. And look, what we can hope for out of this, and this may be the best route, because unfortunately I just don't see civil lawsuits being able to really go forward against Exxon. But if the government decides that they want to take action against Exxon's, decades of deception, what they could do is force Exxon, kind of like they forced the tobacco industry, to start putting money towards education and mitigation. Just like with the tobacco industry, they have to fund the Truth Campaign and these anti-smoking efforts. The government could come forward and force Exxon to start paying into things like, the Paris Climate Agreement. Yeah. Where we're going to give money to developing countries so that they can prepare for the coming sea level rises. That could be a huge route that the government absolutely can take. But again, it's going to take the voters getting out there and getting rid of these fossil fuel funded politicians that don't want to do anything that involves touching Exxon.
Right, which is virtually the entire Republican Party, tragically. Right. What about a RICO prosecution? We have a little less than a minute, Farron.
That's going to be a little bit more difficult as well, because when you're talking about just deception, the water gets a little murky there. It's hard to prove any specific illnesses or anything of that nature directly with Exxon. It's not impossible. But again, I think the easiest
Exxon knew, were
route,
there other companies that knew? I thought the Petroleum Institute pretty much knew in this at least by the 60s or 70s.
Well, see, that's another thing that, we could hope for if a lawsuit ever were developed, is the discovery, finding out what everybody knew, what everybody did, and then we're talking, real possibilities.
Right, and you're talking, if it was BP, you're talking the UK government, it's a British company, if it was Shell, it's the Dutch government, if it was Koch Industries, who is it? Anyhow, Farron Cousins, great to have you with us, Farron. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.